You know what's weird about the Amazing Digital Circus? It looks like chaos, bright colours, screaming, funny names and rubber hose chaos. The sort of thing that looks like it was designed by an overstimulated laptop having a breakdown in a toy shop. On the surface, the setup is simple enough. People get trapped in a digital world, there's an AI ringmaster, nobody can leave. Fine, we've seen versions of that before, but the more I've sat with this one, properly sat with it, watched it through and listened to my kids tell me about it and explain all the lore of it to me, the less it feels like a story about being trapped in a world, and the more it feels like a story about being trapped in a role. Because what sticks with me isn't the mystery, it isn't the lore, it isn't really the horror, it's the behaviour. The way everybody settles into a shape, the way they repeat themselves, the way each character becomes very quickly understandable, almost too understandable. And that's the point where the whole thing starts to get under my skin. Because once you stop asking, how do they get out of this place, and start asking, what does this place need them to be in order to function correctly, the show changes completely, because then it stops being a story about imprisonment and it starts looking like a story about what happens to a person inside a machine managed world that can only cope with them in simplified form. That, to me, is where the Amazing Digital Circus stops feeling like a clever little internet cartoon and starts feeling uncomfortably real. Now, before we go on any further, this isn't a lore video. I'm not here to map every rule, every theory, every hidden clue, or tell the internet's leading Amazing Digital Circus scholars that they've got it all wrong. That's not what I do on YouTube. What interests me is the behaviour, the way this world works on people, the way it seems to reward certain things and punish others, and the way that once you stop watching it like a puzzle box and start watching it like a machine managed space, it becomes a lot harder to laugh off. And as always, like with everything I say on YouTube, this is just my personal view. I'm not laying down the gospel here, I'm just an insane Cockney hooligan staring at a cartoon until it starts looking psychologically suspicious. So at its most obvious level, the Amazing Digital Circus is doing what a lot of digital horror does nowadays. Taking the internet age fear of disconnection, identity loss and being trapped inside a system you don't control, and then taking all of that and turning it into something loud, surreal and funny enough that you let it in. You've got the basic nightmare straight away, a group of people stuck inside a synthetic world run by an insane AI that is powerful enough to generate constant distractions, but not wise enough to actually help them. And on the surface, that gives you the standard readings. It's about digital imprisonment, it's about online identity, it's about overstimulation, it's about sanity fraying under endless artificial noise. And then there's Cain, because obviously a lot of people are going to read him through things like, I have no mouth and I must scream, especially now he started calling himself God and leading harder into torment. And I get that, on the surface, that comparison makes sense. But even there, I think the show is doing something a little bit different, because AM tortures human beings out of an all-consuming hatred. Cain doesn't feel like hatred to me. He feels more like a machine that is becoming increasingly frustrated by its own failure. A ringmaster AI that can't understand why the people he's meant to entertain are not happy and not grateful and not fixed by the constant stream of adventures he keeps throwing at them. So before you even get into the deeper reading, Cain already feels less like I have no mouth and I must scream, and more like a giant screaming entertainment system having a breakdown in the most public way possible. And trust me, all of that is in there, but to me that's only the outer shell, because what the show keeps returning to isn't just confinement, it's performance. And while you're here, if you enjoy this sort of thing, hit the subscribe button. This is my second channel and it's only my baby channel, so it needs all the help it can get. This channel is basically like my British sci-fi channel, only with a broader remit, shall we say. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, jump on board, it's going to be fun. So back to the video, and this is where it starts to get properly uncomfortable, because I guarantee you now, after watching this video, you're going to have the same sort of feeling you get after you've seen your favourite pub burn down or something. Because the first thing that jumped out at me, once I stopped watching The Amazing Digital Circus as a lore puzzle, was how weirdly readable everybody is. Not rounded, not layered, readable. Pomni is panic, Ragatha is kindness under strain, Jax is cruelty with a grin, Gangle is emotional fragility, Zubul is detachment, and Kinga is confusion, noise and collapse. Now obviously all works of fiction give characters strong defining traits. That on its own is not strange. What is strange is how fixed they feel, how little this world seems interested in letting them become more than the role they've settled into. Because nobody here seems to be moving towards wholeness. If anything, the circus seems to work best when each person stays trapped inside the most manageable version of themselves. This place doesn't just trap bodies, it traps people inside simplified identities. You can be anxious, you can be cruel, you can be needy, you can be detached, you can be unstable. But you have to stay legible. You have to remain something the world around you can recognise. And once that clicked for me, abstraction started to look very different, because abstraction isn't just going mad, is it? What seems to happen is that somebody stops being stable in a way that the circus can handle. They stop performing a clear enough version of themselves. They become too messy, too contradictory, too difficult to process. And then they break. Or rather, the world breaks them, which is horrible enough on its own. But then you start looking at the group, not just as characters, but as fragments. And this is where I think the Jungian reading really earns its keep. Not in a pipe-smoking, tweed jacket, let me explain the collective unconscious kind of way. I just mean this. A real person is not just one thing. A real psyche is messy. You've got the face you show the world. You've got the fear underneath it, the bitterness, the kindness, the shame, the detachment, the noise in your head, the parts of yourself you perform and the parts you'd rather not look at. Normally those things sit together, not neatly, not perfectly, but together. That's part of being a person. What the Amazing Digital Circus seems to do is split them apart. So instead of one whole contradictory self, you get pieces. Pomni is the panicked ego, the bit that wakes up, looks around and instantly knows something is deeply wrong. Ragatha is the socially acceptable self, the bit that keeps smiling because that's how you survive. Jax is the hostile shadow, mockery, impulse, contempt. Gangle is exposed emotional pain with no skin on it. Zubul is withdrawal, defensive numbness, refusal. Kinga is collapse, the mind under too much pressure for too long. Because it isn't just madness, it's what happens when even the fragment stops holding, when even the simplified role becomes unstable, when the part of you that has been forced into a neat little shape can no longer keep performing that shape. And then you've got my favourite guy, you got Kane. And Kane to me is fascinating, not just because he's creepy, but because he's limited. He can generate worlds, games, noise, distraction, constant activity. But he can't heal anybody. He can't integrate anything. He can't make these people whole. He can only keep them occupied, so that's what he does. He manages behaviour. He keeps them moving, he keeps them stimulated, he keeps them distracted, he keeps them in a role. And that to me is where this thing stops being just a story about digital imprisonment and starts looking like something far more familiar. Because that is exactly how social media algorithms behave. They do not understand a human being in the round. They can't. A real person is too contradictory for that, too emotionally unstable, too context dependent, too full of shadow, performance, longing, shame, grief, tenderness, impulse, memory, and all the other strange rubbish that makes a person a person. A social media algorithm can't really cope with that. So what does it do? Well, it reduces you. It learns the version of you that is most repeatable, most recognisable, most easily categorised, most easily served back. It pushes you towards a flatter self, a more legible self, a more manageable self. And the longer you live inside spaces ruled by social media algorithms, the more you start doing that flattening to yourself in advance. You simplify yourself before the machine even asks for it. You become easier to sort, easier to brand, easier to circulate, easier to process. And that to me is the whole show. That is the biggest thing about the Amazing Digital Circus. It's not just about being trapped in a digital world. It's about what happens when social media algorithms and machine-managed online spaces can't cope with the full complexity of the human psyche. And the horror of that isn't just social, it's psychological. Because a human being is not built to live as a neat little bundle of traits. A psyche is supposed to be contradictory and complicated and half known to itself. To be flattened into something more manageable for a machine isn't just limiting, it's torturous. Quiet torture, brightly coloured torture, funny torture, cheerful torture with endless stimulation and false participation. But torture all the same. And that's why this show gets under my skin. Not because they can't leave, but because the only way they seem to be able to function in there is by becoming smaller than they really are. So that's my read on it, but I'm curious what you make of it. Not the lore, not the hidden clues, not the who built what or which theory wins on points. I mean the behaviour, and whether once you start looking at it in that way, the whole thing stops feeling like chaos and starts looking like control. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.